Hi guys. Like I posted yesterday, I wanted to go live and just do a quick Tarot 101. I say quick, I have no idea how long this is going to take. Tarot cards are something that appears maybe simple to explain, but there's actually a lot of depth to it, so we'll see how long the video takes. I'm going to give a couple of minutes for some people to jump on. I just want to make sure that everyone gets their questions, and if you have them, I'll do my best to answer them. You'll have to bear with me through this video. I've been battling off a chest cold for about a week and a half now, and I know I sound like I've been smoking for 40 years, but I'm only 37, and I just have a chest cold. So anyhow, so I will be coughing, and I do have a glass of water, so every once in a while I'll get a drink, but just a heads up. If I say anything and you don't understand it, please let me know. I can always go back over it again. Hi, Alexandria. Glad to have you on. So I guess I'll get started. So I have a couple topics I wanted to go over, and I know some of you asked some questions in the group of me, but some of the topics that I wanted to cover, and I've got notes here so I don't get completely lost, is what exactly is tarot reading? What are these cards? How do you do this? How are the cards set up? How do you interpret them? And then there's also questions about how do you actually read the cards? How do you do these different spreads? What do the different tarot card spreads mean? And then you get into, I'll get a little bit into how to read reversed cards versus upright cards. And then I'll cover, there's about 5 cards that in the deck itself that people often misinterpret. And these scary cards can also, can always turn up in a reading. And if you don't have someone who really understands what they're doing, they can really jack up your day with these cards. So I'm going to go over sort of these 5 cards and how they're often misinterpreted in a pretty scary way, when actually there are not scary cards at all. So anyway, we'll get started with what exactly is tarot. So while this appears to be an easy question, it's actually pretty complex. Every tarot reader or anyone who's ever dabbled in tarot cards, they will answer this question differently. It's really based on how you personally use your cards, what your spiritual beliefs are, what your life perspective is, and how you're using these cards. What's more important than what tarot is and how tarot works is knowing how you use your tarot cards, how you will use tarot. Why is this important? This is important because it's going to help you understand how and when the tarot cards will serve you best, and how and when the tarot cards will serve people that you're doing readings for best. Some people who read tarot cards use them as a way to predict the future by tapping into psychic abilities. Some people strictly use the tarot as a tool for unlocking the conscious mind through imagery and interpretation. In between these two is a whole myriad of combinations of how people use tarot cards. But generally speaking, the use of tarot cards are basically to get guidance on different issues in areas of life. The cards themselves provide a more evolved awareness of what most people already know deep down inside, but maybe they're avoiding it, or they're ignoring it, or they are not paying attention or listening to their intuition. So the tarot cards kind of call those people out and say, hey, you already know this, pay attention, here's your card to tell you that. In my personal opinion, the information that people get from a tarot card reading is really information they already know, and it's not any new information. So I'll get into a little bit about the cards themselves. So I personally prefer the Rider-Waite deck, and I know this is going to be backwards because I don't know why the phone does this, but anyway, this is the Rider-Waite deck. It's probably one of the more common decks. It's one of the older decks. It's the one that resonates the most with me. There are tens and tens and tens of different decks out there for all different styles and all different types of readers. The tarot deck, the Rider-Waite one, is just the one that sort of resonates best with me. It's more traditional. The cards, the graphics on the cards are very detailed, and we're going to go into the death card in a bit. But the cards themselves are very detailed. The imagery is amazing, and it really gives you a good amount of stuff to pull from, a good amount of information you can pull out of them. So a tarot deck has 78 cards. These 78 cards are broken into two different categories, your major and minor arcana. The major has 22 cards. Now these cards are numbered 0 through 21. They start with the Fool and they end with the World. These cards represent major milestones, spiritual awareness. And these basically reveal the stages or events that are universal. These are universe things. These are things that are not affected by human nature. These are things that, these universally occurring stages, these cycles that we go through, that's what these cards represent, these universal cycles. Each of these cards are unique because they actually can apply and have significance in all aspects of your life. Some of the minor cards apply to, finances or things like that, but these cards, they apply to all aspects, including career, finances, relationships, spirituality. These are your overreaching universal cards. The minor cards, there are 56 of them, and they fall into 4 different suits. They go, they're numbered ace through 10, and they basically have the ace through 10 plus the face cards. So your king, knight, queen, and page. So these cards, unlike the major cards, these minor cards apply to your daily ups and downs in life. These cards point to events that, or things that are going on in your life that are a result of human nature as opposed to a universal sort of cycle. So each of the number cards like the ace through 10, those can also represent time frames. So if you're doing a reading and a number card pops up like a 4 of Pentacles, and you're doing a career read, that 4 of Pentacles can indicate 4 months or 4 years, whatever you're reading. It sort of will give you a general time frame. Some people use the number cards that way. I usually don't read that way. I don't like giving time frames on readings. It's just my style. Like I said, everybody's going to establish their own, how they use tarot cards, and how you read is going to be different from me. So a lot of what I'm telling you today is how I do this, what my interpretation is. Hi, David. Thanks for joining. So I want to talk about the 4 different suits that we find in these minor cards. The first one we find is the swords. The sword suit represents and relates to air. Okay, so these represent power, rationality, intellect, thoughts. The next one is the cups, and the cups represent water, and they relate to water. They represent emotions, creativity, feelings. This is your touchy-feely suit. And then we have pentacles. The pentacles relate to earth, and they represent things like money, financial issues, material possessions, careers. The pentacles are coins. They look like coins if you've never seen a tarot deck. And lastly, we have the wands. Hi, Kristen. Lastly, we have the wands, and the wands relate to fire. Hi, Sally. The last one we have is the wands, and the wands relate to fire, and they represent inspiration, spirituality, ideas, energy, fire, movement, going. So these are your 4 suits that fall within the minor ones. The ace cards, let's talk about the numbers again for just a second and go up through the suit cards, right? So the ace cards are generally the first card of a suit. So the ace card is your beginning. This is your seed. When an ace card pops up in your reading, this is going to represent a new beginning, a new opportunity, a seed. And what you know about seeds, if you plant them and you water them and you take care of them, they grow. So this is what the ace card tells you in your readings. If we go up through the numbers and we get up to the actual the suit cards, so your king, queen, page, those cards, the knight, those cards are your royal cards. So those fall at the end of the number rows, the number lines. So those are your more mature cards. Those represent a more mature, stable, highly evolved, developed. So when those cards fall, you're looking at a message or a suggestion from the cards that whatever issue you're reading on is well established, it is grounded, it is a solid, well thought out. These are the types of things that I associate with the higher suits, the higher number cards in the suit. So generally speaking, when we're talking about reading cards, determining a card's significance is in a spread is entirely up to you as the reader. There are some general definitions for these cards, some general things that they can represent, and there's a few different ways that you can go about interpreting the cards. Some readers will only read upright cards, and what an upright card, the difference between what I'm talking about here is an upright card. Let's say you're dealing out a tarot reading, you're putting out your spread, and you flip a card up and it's like this, right? So this is a reversed card. This is an upright card, okay? So there's some tarot readers that only read upright cards, and there's good reason for that. If you're new to tarot reading, it's hard enough to learn the definition and the meanings and the imagery behind 78 cards. If you have to learn 2 complete tarot decks, that's a lot of stuff to try to remember. So with good reason, when you're new to reading, just reading the upright cards is a good way to sort of get acquainted with the deck. Once you sort of understand what you're doing and what you're reading, you can start to read the reversed cards. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. If you want to start reading reverse cards now, in addition to upright cards, have at it. I am a huge advocate for reading reverse tarot cards. Reverse tarot cards can add depth to your reading. They have a different meaning than the upright cards, and they generally don't have a negative meaning at all. So you don't have to worry about, scary, spooky cards popping up, or spooky things popping up in your reading, because really the reverse cards are not negative. But they do add an interesting dynamic to the reading. And honestly, when reverse cards have come up in readings that I do, I've never been wrong. I've never had a card that was not well received by the person I was reading for. So how do you interpret these reversed cards? I'll touch on real quick before I get on with some of the other information. So generally speaking, upright cards represent external energy. They represent your environment and what's going on with you. When you reverse a card, they represent internalized energy. The message would apply to yourself personally, your internal energy. They can also represent an imbalance of energy, or can indicate where energy is blocked, depending on how they fall in the reading, what cards are around them, and what position in your spread the card falls into. And I'll get into different spreads in just a bit. But a reversed card basically represents like an imbalance of energy or where energy is blocked. So it adds a little extra dynamic to your reading. When you're reading reverse cards and upright cards, if you're a visual person, this deck is going to be really good for you because the imagery is so strong. And I'm going to talk about 5 cards that often people view as spooky cards. And these are the Death card, the Death card, not in this order because I don't have my notes here, The Five of Cups, the Tower card, looks scary, right? Ten of Swords, I don't know if you guys can see that, and the Devil himself. None of these cards are actually scary in real life, even though the imagery on them looks pretty frightening. So let's start with, Death. Okay, so this card, I have seen inexperienced tarot readers actually tell someone that this card represents a death. Are you kidding me? A death? No. Okay, so let's talk about this. This card represents that something has ended. Oh, Sally, I have a golden and turquoise aura. Well, that's nice. Thank you. Magenta at my crown. Well, I love doing what I'm doing right now, so this is actually a lot of fun for me, despite my cold here. So this death card actually represents something that has ended or deeply changed forever. The death card is permanent, right? So this card is never about the actual end, though, because with every end, there's always a new beginning. So it's always, it's also about, it's not just about endings, but it's also about what comes right after it, the rebirth, the growth, the new seeds that find the sunlight now that the weeds are gone. So if we look at the symbolism of the card itself, and I'm going to put it up in front of the phone here, please let me know, in front of the camera here, please let me know if you can't hear my voice for whatever reason. I want you guys to look at the imagery of the card while I'm talking about it. Okay. So here is the death card. And the imagery of this card, I want you guys to notice that the person riding the horse is actually Death himself. And he's on a white horse. White is the color of purity. And this represents the fact that death is the ultimate purifier of everything. And with death, things are born fresh and things are born new. The black and white flag that he carries represents, the black part represents an absence of light, and the white rose on the flag represents beauty and immortality. Okay. If you notice that death is actually a skeleton, and you can see his little skeleton face there. Death is actually a skeleton, and this is because when you die, the only thing left is the bones. And that is the only part of the body that survives after death. And even when we do release, well, you know what? I'll get into the meaning of I'll get into the meaning of all this symbolism in just a bit. We'll just talk about the. I just want to point out the picture first. So, skeleton. Also notice that he's wearing armor. So, armor indicates that death is invincible, and death cannot be conquered. And I also want you to take notice of the people on the card itself. Okay, so the people on the card, you'll see men, women, children. There's even a bishop on there. These people indicate that death does not care who you are. Death does not discriminate. The death card applies to everyone equally. Some other things I want you to notice is in the background. Let's see. And we are backwards on this card. I do apologize. Okay, see those two pillars in the background with the sunshine right over here? So those two pillars are guarding the gateway to the sun. And that represents knowledge. The sun represents knowledge on this card. And this is knowledge needed to gain immortality. Get through those gates with your knowledge, and you've achieved immortality. The boat on the river, which is over on this side, right there he is. That boat on the river is the one that carries the souls across the River of Styx. And if you're not familiar with that story of the boat and the rowboat that carries you across the River of Styx, just plug that into Google. There's a lot of information online about it. It's a really cool story. But basically, that's how souls get to the afterlife according to that story. So that imagery is also reflected on here. So what does all this mean? So let's look at the card again here. So this card is symbolic of a major phase or aspect of your life that's going to end. And with this ending will be the beginning of something more important. This is a card of significant transformation. This is a card of change, transition, putting the past behind you, parting ways with things that don't serve you anymore. The Death card can also represent the fact that this change is sudden and unexpected. This represents a need to let go of unhealthy attachments, breaking bad habits, purging, trimming off the fat, getting rid of the unnecessary in your life. So that's what the Death card represents. So I hope it's a little less spooky for you guys now. All right, the next card I want to go over is Tower. I'm going to get a drink. My throat hurts. I'm sorry. This chest cold is killing me. I've been coughing for a week. All right, so the Tower card. Excuse me. So the Tower card here, a lot of people look at this card and it looks pretty scary, right? So you've got, see if I can point to this and show you. So you've got lightning on the top here. You've got, the crown being blown off of this building, the tower here. The tower is really tall. It's built on top of this craggy mountain. People are just falling and just jumping out of the tower head first. They don't even care. They're just trying to escape the flames and all of the destruction that's happening, right? So that's kind of what we have going on here. The tall tower built on this sort of craggy mountain represents your ambitions that have been built on false premises, okay? The fire, lightning, destruction, the lightning bolt is breaking down exteriors and breaking down existing forms in your life to make room for new ones. The lightning represents a flash of truth. You know, when you think about lightning, if lightning strikes in the dark, I mean, it just illuminates everything around you, right? It gives you vision. It allows you to see. It's a flash of inspiration, a flash of knowledge, a flash of realization. So this flash of truth is what the lightning is doing, and that flash of truth is just destroying this building. It's destroying these ambitions that were built on, unstable ground or false hope. The lightning, and I know this card is backwards for you guys because of my phone, but this lightning is actually going from right to left, and that is the direction of spirit to mental. Spirit to material. So the lightning is actually coming from spirit and it's destroying material. That's the direction it's going. So the card is speaking towards material destruction, not necessarily spiritual destruction. Material destruction doesn't necessarily have to be actual material stuff. And I know this is I sound like I'm crazy here. Okay, so what I mean is, it doesn't necessarily mean that this card applies to the destruction of your house or your job or your career or your finances. It can be the destruction of a relationship or the destruction of ideals that you built up about something or someone or some situation. Okay, that's what this tower does. That's what this tower represents. People leaping from the building. So these people are fleeing the destruction. They're falling head first. They're doing this because there's this, the head first fall represents a sudden influx of spiritual consciousness. Okay, so this is the lightning flash. The lightning flash comes in, shines its light on everything, and the people in the building are just losing their minds. They're just falling head first to represent this influx of consciousness, this influx of new information that they have. And this flash of lightning and this influx of information, this completely upsets all your old notions about the relations between the subconscious and the self-conscious. So what this card tells me when it comes up in a reading is that we all sit safely within these narrow confines of our lives. We are comfortable with our current thought processes. We're comfortable with our current belief systems. We're comfortable with our current expectations until the Tower card shows up. Then out of the blue, something shocking happens, and then that completely destroys our picture of peace and harmony, blows your mind through the loop. Then you have this sudden realization that your comfort was all based on, this inadequate foundation, these false beliefs. Okay, so that's what this card represents. It is a humbling and frightening experience for someone. And I gotta tell you, I'm doing this video and I'm doing it on my phone. And hi, Joanna. I'm doing this video right now on my phone, and I'm getting a text message right now. And this text message is for someone that I did a private reading for, maybe 2 weeks ago, and this card popped up in their reading. They're telling me, just now I got a text message, she's telling me that I was right about this card, and the man that I told her to stay away from assaulted her. So this card, anyway, I always get goosebumps and chills when stuff like that happens. I get these things, and if you've talked to me before, I've mentioned them. I get these power showers from my guides. So this is an indication to me, and I'm sorry, this is off topic, but it's like poking me right now. So when I'm doing a reading for someone, or even if it's just like an intuitive reading, or if I'm tagged into a mediumship thing, if I'm picking up on a spirit or something like that, or even if I'm doing a tarot reading and it's super good, my guides will tell me. They will tell me by giving me what I call a power shower. And a power shower for me is that I get these like chills that go in waves through my body, from my head all the way to my toes and to my head again. It makes the hairs stand up all over my body. And I'm watching these messages pop up for her, and I feel so bad. I want to go talk to her. I'm going to finish this video, and then I'm going to tag in with her. But I'm getting power showers left and right right now, and I'm getting like chills. Okay. Anyway, moving along. Sorry about the sidebar there, but so here's the Tower card, right? So where was I? Okay, so this is a humbling and frightening experience for people, but it's super necessary. The Tower experience is going to be anything that shakes your foundation. It will shake up your security. You might feel insecure. You might feel unstable. And it may cause you to question beliefs and ideas that you have held so dearly to your heart. And that's okay. That's what this card does. With any destruction, just like the Death card, with any destruction comes creation. So this card itself, the Tower card, actually represents an awakening. And it's about inspiration, freedom, reality, and release from bondage. It is a truth and honesty card, if there ever was one. The truth and honesty comes like a lightning bolt and just shakes you up. All right. Moving along. One other thing about the tarot card, about the Tower card. This card can represent external and internal things. So this can be a shaking up and destruction of something physical, like a relationship or your career or your job. Again, right? So the Tower card is a major card. We talked about major and minor. This is a major card. So this can universally apply to your life. This is part of your life cycle. So this can represent internal or external things. So like I said, it can represent a destruction of your job or your career, a relationship, things like that. It can also represent a shaking up of your spiritual foundations. So just be aware of that when you're doing readings, and look towards the context of the rest of the reading. Why are you doing the reading? What's the question that you're seeking guidance on? What other cards are around the Tower card that point to that? Are the Tower cards flanked by pentacles? Are the Tower cards flanked by swords? So these are things that you sort of, when you look at the cards together, you're going to read them. All right, so let's talk about the 10 of Swords. Now that I mentioned the sword card. Is it swords? Swords? 10 of Swords. Okay. I'm from Pittsburgh, so I have a weird accent sometimes. And then I went to college at WVU, so I get this like southern twang every once in a while. Anyway, hi Jake. I'm sure Jake's gonna watch this at some point. Jake is from my college stomping ground. Kind of, not far from it. All right, let's talk about this card. This card represents a situation that has reached its limits. You've reached rock bottom. It's time to get up, move on. What's lost is lost. Okay, so that's what this card generally represents. So let's talk about the symbolism of this card for a second. I just want to point out a couple of the images. We have a dude just laying on his face. 10 long swords are sticking out of his back. Dude has been stabbed. A red cape is draped over the lower half of his body. The top half, you can see. The sky above him is pitch black, and there's a general feeling of pain, loss, misfortune, melancholy. The sea that you can see in the background, the blue part, represents a sea. So the sea that you see is still and calm, and the sun, look that up, the sun is rising in the background. So that's a sunrise that you see, the yellow coming into the black, pushing the night out. This represents, indicating that the darkness is going to be dispelled. The sun is pushing out the dark. Each new beginning must come from an end, and with every defeat are sown the seeds of victory. So this is not, a lot of people, a lot of readers, hi Jennifer, nice to have you, hi Kristen, a lot of readers will interpret this card and not talk about the positive aspects of it. It just looks like a really spooky looking card, but really there's some positive stuff that we can really focus on with this card. So the one thing I want to talk about is 10, the number 10, right? So 10, I mentioned earlier about the ace cards being your number 1 card, your start card, your seed card. This is the card that pops up when you have a new opportunity or a new chance to do something or start something new. These are your seed cards, right? So the 10 card, hi, 10 card, is signifies an end. The 10 card is the last. The cards run 1 through 10 plus your suit cards. So when we get to a 10 card, we're looking at finality of a situation. Particularly with the sword card, we've got a serious finality of the situation. The other thing I want to point out is sword cards themselves. I had mentioned earlier, the sword cards represent intellect, rationality, power, and thoughts. Okay, so this card is speaking towards that energy. Okay. And it's also speaking towards finality. Okay, so now that we have that sort of base identification of the key parts of the card, let's talk about what it actually, what the imagery symbolizes. So what this card points to is a sudden and unexpected failure or disaster. This is a card that tells me that the person I'm reading for might feel helpless. They've been destroyed, stabbed, killed. They can't get up. I mean, there's 10 swords holding them down. Something may have come, to a crashing and sudden end, and the person may feel attacked or backstabbed. I mean, these are all things that when you're looking at the imagery on the card, like I said when we started, you're going to interpret these cards the way that your spirit guides you to interpret them. That's the real magic behind tarot cards. There's nothing magic or spooky about these. It's just paper. Where it becomes real is when you listen to what your heart is telling you, when you listen to what your spirit is pointing you to, when you pay attention to what images actually stick out on a card. I mean, there's hundreds of symbolic images on these cards. You may only really notice 1 or 2 when you're doing a reading. I don't always pull from all of the symbolism in a card. I don't always use all the meanings that a card has. I feel what that reading is doing. I feel what those cards are telling me, and that's the information I share. You can use some of this information as a guide, but really your guide is right there. It's right here. So back to this card again. Sorry, sidebar. So this card, even though this looks like a card of really severe endings, there's always a new beginning and rebirth, a rejuvenation of the spirit. We see that sun rising in the background. It's pushing out the dark. The sea is calm in the background. So while this card might seem negative when you first look at it, it's actually a card of hope. And it's an indication that, you know, your troubles are not permanent. Your troubles are now, and this is a 10 card, and your troubles are over. And things are going to start looking up. It's going to start getting sunny. Things are going to start getting better. Whatever it is that this card applies to, that event is over. The pain from that event or that person or that whatever is done. Let's say you're doing a reading and someone asks you, you know, to look into their work, their job, their career, right? So this card pops up as a card that you pulled for their career. You know, this card would tell me that they're not happy in their job, that their job has just left them feeling defeated. It's left them feeling helpless, like they can't get ahead. Maybe coworkers are just not treating them fairly. They're feeling betrayed in the workplace, not supported. But you know what? There's you know, that job is coming to an end. That job, this card is telling me that this job is coming to an end. This is a finality. This pain that this work is causing is coming to an end. So that's how that card is read. This card is a signal for the person to pick themselves up and get going again. So anyway, hidden beneath the surface of this card is actually the ultimate power of the suit of swords itself, right? So the ability to, and this is kind of, I think, for me, what's key with these cards is the energy behind the suits, right? So we talked about the swords cards, the sword suit, applying to thought, right? Thought, inspiration, things like that. So this card, the energy behind the power of the sword suit is the ability to analyze the situation, you know, really think about your responses in the situation and learn from yourself. This card represents thoughts, thinking, you know. I hope this is helping you guys. Hi, Lena. Is it Lina or Lena? Thanks for joining. We're working through 5 of what I think are spooky cards and why they're not actually spooky. We are on card number 4, which is... I saved my favorite for last, by the way. So I'm on card number 4. I have one more card after this. So we're going to talk about the Devil card. And this card is like, Lena, good. Okay, hi. I'll never say it wrong again. Let's talk about the Devil card. Okay. A lot of people think this card is spooky just because it's the devil. And it looks creepy, right? Like, there's 2 human slaves, and they're chained. And he's like half goat. He's got some bat wings. Crazy eyes. I mean, this is like an upside down pentacle. I mean, that's not good, right? So let's talk about this this card itself. So generally, and this is another one, right? So this card is not a bad omen card. So a lot of times I've seen tarot readers, not a lot, every once in a while I see a bad reader, but sometimes I've seen people do tarot readings and they're like, this card falls and they're like, oh, it's spooky, something terrible is going to happen to you. No, 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 no. Don't listen to those people. Tarot cards do not predict death and just like destruction that you'll never recover from. You know, there's always a dark and a light, right? There's a dark and a light to these cards. Even the super happy, crazy, fun ones, there's still a dark side to them. It may not be as dark as some of the other cards. And when I say dark, I don't mean evil. I mean heavy. Heavy. Heavy is a better word. Let's use the word heavy. So there's a heavy and a light side to these cards. So the Devil card. This card, I remember when I was learning tarot, I was learning some of the meanings of the cards. This card intrigued me. It intrigued me for a couple reasons. One, the imagery is, I think, really interesting. And the fact that it's just the Devil card, to me, was sort of taboo. It's a taboo kind of thing to dig into, right? So, anyway. So this card here doesn't actually represent the devil at all. This card actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to get a drink. My throat is hurting again. This card represents something that you are chained to. This could be an addiction. This could be a bad habit. This could be a bad job. This card comes up in a reading when you are doing something or partaking in something that is keeping you tied down and not letting you be the free person that you are, right? So let's talk about the symbolism real quick on this card. I'm going to put it up to the thing here so you guys can see up close. So this card portrays what we traditionally think of the devil, right? Part man, part goat. In lots of myths, the goat was considered an unclean and lustful animal. If you guys know anything about mythology, Pan, the god Pan, is one of these creatures, right? Half goat, half man. And Pan was in mythology was known as the creature that would chase after all the nymphs. I mean, he was nymphomaniac. I mean, these are where these words come from. These are if you look into the etymology of these words, that's where they're coming from. They're coming from the mythology. So when we see, this sort of goat man creature, a lot of times we think about, dirty, lustful. However, keep in mind that the goat also can symbolize the scapegoat. So this is the person or thing which we project the inferior side of ourselves onto in order to feel better about ourselves. So the devil represents the scapegoat that we blame for all of our troubles in life. So if we talk a little bit about what we're seeing on the card, and I'm sorry, I think I'm shaking here. So let's talk about what we see on the card itself. So the devil has wings of a vampire bat. So the vampire bat is an animal that sucks the lifeblood out of its prey. So this is symbolic of what happens when we give full reign of our raw desires. When we give full reign into the area of our raw desires, we lose vitality, we lose life energy. And then the other thing I pointed out was his crazy eyes, right? So his eyes kind of look hypnotic, like they're kind of crazy. Ooh. So crazy eyes here is representative of how vices in this world have a way of sort of dragging you in. I mean, they like a hypnotic stare. They just call you, like, come near, come to me, like, here, have this glass of beer, here, indulge in this, here, do this, stay here, you're comfortable. So that sort of hypnotic stare that you see is, it brings anyone who comes near within his power. Above him, I mentioned the inverted pentagram. This signifies the darker side of occultism, magic, and at his feet, you see the man and the woman, right? Both of them are naked. They're chained to the podium where the devil sits. They appear, when you first look at them, right, to be held here against their will. But if you look closely, the chains are loose. They are loose enough to get them off of their heads. They can be easily removed. And this symbolizes that the bondage to the devil is ultimately a voluntary matter, which consciousness can release. If you know you've got, if you know you're bound to something, your mind is your power to breaking that. Okay, so also the man and the woman, they have tiny horns. just like the devil, which, and they have tails, which represents the more you stay the more you stay with the devil, the more you're like the devil. And let's see. The tails also represent animalistic or lower energy tendencies. So this card points towards, materialism, just very carnal energies is what we've got going on in this card. Lastly, the background is black. Black, black, black. Dark, doorless. It implies that the devil dwells in the most inaccessible realm of the unconscious. And usually, this card indicates that a crisis is needed in order to maybe break you from these chains. So let's talk a little bit about interpreting what these symbols mean on here. So the card itself represents hidden forces of negativity that can constrain you and trick you into thinking that you're imprisoned by external forces that are out of your control, when in reality, the chains around the necks on the people are loose, and they can take those chains off at any given time, which means that you are in control of what you think is controlling you. The devil is an inner force within each of us. And the card itself and the image of the devil represents fears, addictions, and harmful impulses. The devil is known throughout many religions as the master of deception and illusion. And the illusion that he's creating on this card is that you are bound to him. The figures in this card are free to remove the chains, indicating that they have freely given the devil the power he has over them. So when you see this card in a reading, you really want to ask yourself where you're stuck and where you're restricted in life. You might be tricked into believing that you're in the position you are right now because of external forces that are completely out of your control, when in reality you've created this mess yourself. You have created your own chains of imprisonment, and you have created your own powerlessness. Hopelessness is a really common thing that we see with the devil card. A sense of hopelessness can accompany this card. The person you're reading for might feel like they have despair. They may have a pessimistic view because they feel like so much is out of their control. So that's the devil card. Not as spooky as I told you thought. Hi, Beverly. I'm not doing readings right now. I'm doing a 101 on tarot reading. So the last card I want to talk about is probably, I think, my favorite card in the deck. And it's a weird card because it's like right in the middle of nothing. Just like the 5. It's just like it's a 5 card in the middle of one of the basic suits. But I love this card. This comes up in readings a lot, and it's really a cool card, and I like the imagery on it. So I'll put it up to the screen so you can see it. So what we have here is a figure who is wearing a black cloak, and he's got his head hung, and you can't see his face because he's just in so much despair. He's looking at the feet are 5 cups. He's looking at the 3 which have fallen over and the contents have spilled on the ground. The other 2 behind his back remain standing and full. So there's the 3 that fell. There's the 3 that are spilled everywhere, and then he's got 2 behind him. Ahead of him is a powerful river, the little blue strip on there. And if you look in the back behind him, in the background of the picture, you will see a castle in the distance and a bridge. And the bridge can lead him over the river to his castle. Just as an aside, I mentioned before, we talked a little bit about what the suits mean. Just as a refresher, the suit of cups represents emotions and creativity. So that's the symbolism that is on this card itself. So let's talk about what the card actually means and how to interpret that symbolism. So this card generally is a card of pain. It's something, it represents something or someone that must be left behind. But it also has, like I said before, there are heavy sides and light sides to every card. And while this card looks super depressing, it's actually a pretty hopeful card, right? So even though you have to leave those 3 spilled cups behind, if you just turn around and look at the 2 cups behind you, you'll see that you still have everything you need. And if you turn around and look at those 2 cups and you pick them up, you can head over to the bridge and go to your castle and live happily ever after. Sure, the 3 cups have spilled. You'll never get the contents of those cups back again, and that's okay. You still have 2 cups left. Now, the card itself tells me that the person I'm reading for is so focused on the 3 cups that fell that they don't even see the 2 cups behind him. They don't even see the 2 cups behind them. So this represents like a lack of fulfillment, non-attainment of expected results. You might be feeling disappointed that a situation hasn't turned out the way that you had hoped. And, instead of moving on to greener pastures, you're just sitting there and you're stewing over these 3 spilled cups. And didn't your mama tell you, don't cry over spilled milk, right? Just go get some new milk. So that's kind of what this card is telling you. It's like, don't focus on those 3 cups. Stop that. Turn around, get your 2 cups, and go home. Stop wallowing in self-pity. Stop having regret at what's been lost. What's lost is lost. The water spilled it can't be retained again. Can't be got back. So the thing that this card, also points to, because it's cups, is that this is emotional regret, not necessarily financial regret, right? So the cups apply to emotions. This card also can often reflect a person who is caught up in the past and unable to move on. So, maybe they're stuck in the past, and because of this, they're so focused on what they've lost and what has happened that they're missing opportunities. They're missing, they're missing out on new chances. They're missing out on happiness. They're missing out on going home. They're missing out on crossing that bridge and going home. And, just go home. Take your cups and go home. So, this card really speaks to, stay positive, think positive, reflect on what's been lost, grieve for it, and then, move on in your life. There's still a ray of hope, and that's what this card represents, because some of the cups are still full, right, and upright. So don't pity yourself when you find yourself in a situation. Instead, look at it as a glass half full, cup half full, instead of your cup half empty. So that's sort of the energy and behind this card. Okay, so those are my 5 spooky tarot cards. That was fun, wasn't it? That was fun. Okay, I promise I'm not doing all of the whole deck. I just wanted to go over those 5. So the thing I want to talk about now that we sort of have gone over some cards and what tarot is and how do you read and all of that stuff, I want to talk a little bit about tarot spreads. My suggestion, so there are billions of different, billions, I don't know, that's a number. There's billions of different ways to throw down tarot cards. There's tons of different spreads. You can make up your own spread. Sometimes I make up my own spread. I don't know, just whatever you sort of whatever you feel drawn to do, that's what you should do. Always, 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 always listen to your gut. So there's more spreads. There's so many different spreads. There's more than I even care to get into. And my suggestion to you, if you want to do tarot reading and you want to learn, is to not get bogged down by all of the different tarot spreads. Start small and grow from there. Hi, Jake. Oh, this is fun. We're having a good time. I'm having a good time. I don't know if anybody else is. So let's talk about, so let's keep talking about these spreads, right? So we're talking about tarot spreads. So you want to position, the position of your cards is important, right? So for me, now again, everybody's going to read tarot cards differently. But the structure, the position of the cards themselves is important because it gives structure to your reading. If you have a logical card layout, it's going to provide you with a roadmap, a sequence of events, cause and effect. Oh, good. I'm glad, Jennifer. cause and effect, etc. Like it's going to give you a roadmap. And as you throw those cards down, if you have a structured layout or a logical layout, it's going to help direct your thoughts. So I know me personally, right? So when I start doing a tarot reading, I'm bombarded with information. As I'm pulling cards, and I'm going to go through my process in a little bit so I can explain to you guys the different ways that I read cards, because I have a few different ways. But I always have a logical spread because it helps me organize my thoughts. It's like outlining lecture notes, right? So here's your spirit throwing information at you. It's like you've got all this stuff, you're intuitively reading this person, you're picking up on things here and information there, and you're like, what do I do with all this, right? So, okay, we're going to pull cards. Well, if you don't throw them in a logical way, you can't read them logically, right? So you want to have sort of a sequence of events. You want to have a timeline. You want the cards to represent a timeline of sorts or to make sense. In nature, when we see things clustered together, we tend to understand and interpret them as a group. So that is just how we're hardwired. So don't fight nature. Throw your cards down in a logical way and interpret them as a group. That's what we're doing. You're interpreting these cards as a group. So there are I want to go over basic 3-card spreads, because if you're new to tarot reading and you're just getting started, I really don't recommend you doing more than 3 or 4 cards in a spread. So I wanted to talk about 3 different basic 3-card spreads, and this will be a good place for you to get started. It'll give you good variety for laying out these cards so that you can start to expand and explore. If you want to throw in an extra card, make your own spread up, do that. But I want to go over these 3 with you. I'm going to grab another drink here. So the first one I want to talk about is called a linear spread. And this is what you most commonly see people doing. And I have pictures. So a linear spread is when you've got 3 cards. And again, I'm so sorry that these are backwards. I don't know how to Facebook correctly, I guess. So what we have here is 3 cards. This is called a linear spread. And linear spreads are traditionally timeline spreads. So these are past, present, future, your path and potential. It can represent, I'm going to fold this. Okay, so it can be like past, present, future, you, yourself, your path and your potential, your relationship and your partner. So with the relationship in the middle, and then a card to represent each of you is a good way to do a relationship read. You can do a card that explains the background of your situation, helps you identify the problem, and then also gives you advice. You can have a card that describes the situation, gives you guidance on what action to take, and predicts what the outcome will be should you follow this action. So it's a pretty versatile 3-card spread, pretty traditional. A lot of times you see this spread in the past, present, future readings. I've done 3-card spreads before. They're super easy to do. So this gives you some variety with that. The next one I want to talk about is a balanced spread. So a balanced spread is a tarot layout where all parts of your reading are equal. With the linear spread, excuse me. With the linear spread, each one of these cards has a different amount or different point in time, right? So past, present, future, it represents, your relationship, your partner. It's not really balanced, right? So a balanced spread is a spread where all parts are equal. No cards are more important than the other cards. This spread is really helpful if you're going to do a reading where you have like mind, body, spirit, physical state, emotional state, mental state, what I think, what I feel, what I do. This is a good spread if you just want to get guidance on 3 areas of your life, or 3 potential outcomes, or, use your creativity. Let your spirit guide you. Listen to what your heart is telling you when you're doing these readings, when you're picking spreads. The last one I want to talk about is a foundational spread. And a foundational spread is a tarot layout where you have a foundation and then a card on the top. So the 2 cards on the bottom provide a background or foundation for the 3rd card on top. So you might do, what worked well, what didn't work well, and what you learned. What you want, what they want, where the situation's going. Strength, weakness, advice, or guidance. So that's kind of how this spread works. More complicated spreads, and I'll post all these in the group when we're done so that you guys can have these as a reference to use. But more complicated spreads where you're doing like 5, 6, 7, 8 cards should be reserved when you feel more comfortable with the cards themselves, when you have a good understanding of the imagery and a good comfort level with the cards. There's an exercise that you can do, a tarot journal exercise that I'll post in the group along with these pictures. But honestly, the more you practice, the more comfortable you're going to get with it. So, it's really important that you really get hands-on with the cards. Look at them. Think about the imagery. That's all part of learning the cards. Eventually, it'll become second nature to you. So, I want to talk just for a minute, because I know I've been going on for a while. I want to talk for just a minute on my personal process, how I draw cards, because I do it, I think, a little differently than some people do. So a lot of times you'll see a tarot reader, and they will, pull a card, they'll shuffle their deck, split their deck, like tap it 3 times, like all this crazy stuff, right? So I don't do any of that stuff. Like, I just have a relationship with my deck. When I'm ready to read, I take a deep breath and I draw cards. I will shuffle, because I don't want the same, because sometimes when I'm done with a reading, I'll just put the cards back on top and not shuffle them. So I shuffle them before I do readings. That's my process. Now, there's a couple ways that there's actually 2 ways that I pull cards. And a lot of people you'll see will just, pull them off the top of the deck. 1, 2, 3 cards, right? So these are your 3 cards. Or if a card pops out of the deck, they might add that one to the mix. Like, this card jumped out, it must be for you, da-da-da-da. So my process is a little different. And you'll notice when I do readings in the group, I will ask people if they have anything that they particularly would like to have guidance on. And the reason I ask that is because I use the astrological wheel to pull cards. What the hell does that mean? Okay, so there's a zodiac astrology wheel. All right, and it's based off of the zodiac, and it's based off of astrology, and there are 12 houses on this wheel, okay? They range, and I can go over each of the 12 houses, I guess. The first house represents self. That's appearance, outward persona. The second house represents possession, so that's wealth, money, value, skills, things like that. The third house is communications. This can include learning, siblings, stuff like that. Your fourth house represents your home. So this is your roots, your inner security, your parents. The fifth house represents creativity. This includes romance, not marriage, but romance. So fleeting romance, or boyfriend, girlfriend, or new relationship. Children, fun, creativity. That's what that fifth house is. The sixth house is service and health, and that includes work, physical health, community service, self-importance. 7th house is marriage and partnerships. This is your more long-term relationships. Your 8th house is death and regeneration. Okay, and this is like a scary word, but really what it represents is sex, letting go. These are sort of the more carnal regeneration, sharing other people's money, stuff like that. The 9th house is mental exploration. And this includes philosophy, higher education, publishing, religion, law, stuff like that, travel. If you ask me a travel question, I'm going to pull from the 9th house. 10th house is career. And this is your, this relates not, so I'm going to distinguish this from the work house, right? So career house is, so your 6th house is your house of work. Your 10th house is your house of career. These are different, okay? So work applies to your job. The 10th house of career applies to your career, status, reputation, vocational purpose, taking power, self-power. The 11th house represents hope and wishes. This is friends, groups, goals, aspirations, dreams. And your 12th house is representative of self-undoing. So this is solitude, transcendence, self-sabotage, the subconscious, basically. So what I do is I ask what you're seeking guidance on, because I'm going to put your question into one of those houses. And when I put your question into one of those 12 houses, I pull cards based on that house. So let me show you what I mean. So let's say that you ask me a question about let's see, about your sister. You ask me a question, you want guidance on your relationship with your sister. So I'm looking at all of my different houses, and I'll make sure I post a zodiac wheel too for you guys. If I forget to post one of these things, please let me know. I don't want to shortchange you guys, but my brain is really full lately. So let's talk about your sister, right? So you asked me about your sister. I'm going to pull from, let's see, probably either the 7th house or the 3rd house. So the 3rd house is communications. The 7th house is marriage and partnerships. I'm probably going to go with the 3rd house if you're asking me about a communication issue with your sister or a basic relationship issue. So when I pull from the 3rd house, let's say I'm doing a 3-card spread for you. You're seeking guidance regarding your sister and how you're communicating with her in your relationship. I'm going to decide that I'm pulling from the 3rd house. I'm going to count off 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. I flip from the top. This is just my process. I flip from the top over. And I flip the card. So this is what flipped, right? So whatever my spread is, this is how I flip the cards. So when I do a reading, I'm going to interpret this card as a reversed judgment card, because that's how it fell. Then I'm going to go 1, 2, pull it on the 3rd house, and I'm going to flip from the top, flip over, and I ended up with the 4 of Wands. So that's going to go next. And then I'm going to throw 1, 2, 3 cards again and flip. And this time I got the High Priestess upright. So that's how I draw cards based on the zodiac astrological wheel of houses. The other way, so let's say you come to me and you're like, I would like a reading. I don't have anything in particular that I would like guidance on, but maybe just tell me what's up. Tell me what's going on with my life. What do I need to pay attention to? What do I need to be focused on? In that case, I pull on your name. So, if your name is Sally and I do a reading for you that's general, I'm going to shuffle the deck and then I'm going to count out S, A, L, L, Y, and I flip. And in this case, I got the 2 of Cups. So that's my first card. Then I Sally it again. A, L, L, Y. Second card. I'm going to interpret this as the reversed King of Cups. So you guys get the picture. That's how I draw cards. This method has served me well. It helps me tune into my deck. It helps my deck tune into what I want from it. It helps focus in on the person or focus in on the specific question. It's totally spooky. It's totally my process. Feel free to adopt it if it resonates with you. But that's what I do. So what questions do you guys have? So one of the questions that came up in the group itself was, about confidence. How do I know, how do I know what I'm doing is right? How do I know these cards are right? How do I know that, how I'm interpreting them is right? The answer to that question is I don't. I don't know that until I get validation and confirmation from the person I'm reading from. I'm just following what I'm told. And if you do or have ever done intuitive readings, if you've ever tuned into someone and told them something about themselves that they knew or didn't know, or something that you shouldn't have known about them, then you know that feeling. You know that feeling of just knowing that this is this is what I should be saying. I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's wrong, but this is what I should be saying. A couple guidelines I have when I'm doing readings. I'm often really careful to be sensitive in the way that I'm saying things. So I read the cards. I read the cards and I tell you what the cards mean. I don't try to tell you what that means for you in particular, because I think for me, when I'm doing a reading, it's important that the cards resonate with you. And if I tell you how those cards apply to your life, or I tell you you should be doing this, or you shouldn't be doing that, or you need to do this, or you need to do this, you're not going to internalize those cards. And I want you to internalize your reading. And so I try really hard to explain the cards to you and what they represent and how they can apply to you in the most general terms that I can. And I allow you to internalize what I'm saying and apply it to your own life. And this is how my cards end up resonating with the people I'm reading as well. The other thing is I don't focus on negative. My deck, I don't allow my deck to be awful. I won't predict horrible situations. I won't tell you you're going to be hurt or injured or killed or someone's going to die. Like that, none of that comes from my deck. My deck is about guidance. My deck is about direction. My deck is a roadmap for you. I don't know where you're going. I don't know where you want to go. I don't know your goals. I don't know your aspirations. But I do know that my guide can provide you with a roadmap. Whether or not you choose to follow that roadmap, whether or not you choose to apply that roadmap to your own personal journey is completely up to you. I'm just here to tell you what your spirits want you to know, what your spirit guides want you to know. So, those are my basic rules. That's my basic process. So I have a couple people still watching. If any of you have questions, let me know. I'll stay on for another minute or two and keep talking. Actually, I'm going to get a drink. So I hope this stuff was helpful for you guys. And I know it was a lot of information. This was a long video, and I appreciate you guys that hung out and stuck it out. If you got this far. I will go ahead and post these in the group. I will post, there was something else I was going to post. I was going to post the Zodiac wheel for you guys. So I'll post the Zodiac wheel, I'll post these spreads, and if anybody has any questions that you want me to answer, feel free to send me a message. Oh, oh, good. I'm so glad, Kristen. I like it when when people really internalize and take on the readings that I give them, because I really want you guys to, you know, the people that I do readings for, I really want them to succeed, and I really want them to, you know, to understand that, you know, these are just cards to help you. They're there to help you. So the one thing I wanted to remind you guys of, over the next couple days, I still have I took on 5 big readings. So over the next few days, I've got 3 left. So I posted 2 of those tarot readings already. Oh, very good, Jennifer. Do you use this deck, or do you have another one you prefer? Like, I know some people don't like the Rider-Waite deck. They like the more artsy decks, and you know, these same concepts apply to oracle cards. And you know, decades ago they used to just, I mean, you can even still do it today. You can do a tarot reading with just a deck of playing cards. I mean, it's 4 suits, right? So you don't have your major cards, you just have your minor cards. But you can do a tarot reading with just a deck of cards if you learn them. But anyway, so so I took on the 5 readings in the group. I did a separate post for that. You guys can go find that. I posted 2 of those readings already with pictures of the tarot spreads that I did. If you are interested, in learning tarot, you can go take a look at the spreads that I did, and you can take a look at the readings that I did, and you can see kind of how I interpreted those cards and how I pulled together the cards as a whole. Because you're not only interpreting, you know, you're not only giving a definition and sort of interpreting and explaining this card and this card and this card, you're explaining how the cards work together, right? So you can talk about each individual card, but in the end, it's how they function together that really is the magical part of the reading. So go, you know, if you're interested, go take a look at those couple readings that I did on that post, and you will, you know, get an idea of how my readings work, how I interpret cards, sort of the stuff that I look for. I just started practicing with my first deck, but I'm only reading for myself. I'm wanting to get into reading cards for other people, but I'm scared. You don't need to be scared, right? So the tarot cards themselves, there's nothing scary or spooky about them. You just have to trust yourself, trust your intuition. And even if you're wrong, I mean, I've had people that I've pulled cards for before, who, you know, I've pulled their reading and it just didn't resonate with them. Now, whether or not that was because, you know, the things that I was discussing, the points that I was making were not applicable yet, and they were, you know, coming down the road, or whether or not that person was in denial about their situation. And so if you're in denial about your situation, of course, someone telling you about it isn't going to resonate with you. Or whether or not I was wrong. So, you know, if you're just getting started and you're, you know, a little uncomfortable with, you know, whether or not you're going to be able to read the cards correctly, and if you know, go back to the beginning of this video after I post it, there's no correct way to read tarot cards. There's suggested ways, there's suggested meanings for cards, and every person is going to interpret the cards differently. So you using your intuition and using your mind and using your creativity and using your gifts to interpret those cards is what's really going to help you in the long run. My suggestion is, when you're starting out and you do these tarot spreads, just go online and use a search engine and search for that specific card. Look at 4 or 5 different websites and how they explain the card. Look at the different ways that the card is interpreted and the different ways that it can apply to different parts of your life, and take all of that information in and learn that. Oh, the other thing I was going to post, I almost forgot. I was going to post the exercise. Let me tell you a little bit. So I wrote down this sort of like beginner tarot card exercise. Let me find it here. Okay, so there's an exercise that you guys can do to really learn how to do tarot cards and really learn the cards themselves. Because without knowing what the cards are, I mean, that's kind of the whole heart of the understanding the cards, and understanding your interpretation of the cards is the heart of doing a reading, right? So the best way to do that is to live the cards, right? So every day, this is an exercise that you guys can do to sort of help you learn the cards. Every day in the morning when you get up, choose a card. And I'll post this in the group too so you can reference it. So you choose a card, just a random card. I don't care what it is. Just pick a card out of your deck. You may ask the deck, what card do I need to focus on today? What do I need to know about my life? What card needs my attention? What do you want me to learn about? Your tarot deck will give you a card. So just draw a card every day. You don't have to have a question. Look at the card. Okay, just study the card. What's your initial impression? What stands out to you about the imagery? What words come to mind when you look at the card? How does it make you feel? What emotions? And so after a few minutes of looking at that card, write these things down. Document your instinctive interpretations of this card. Then go online and look up the meaning. So go to those 4 or 5 different websites, read about the card, write that down, document that down as well. Once you do that, put the card back in your deck and go about your day. While you're going about your day, pay attention to where the energy from that card shows up in your day. You may come across people or situations that possess the energy of that card. You may come across situations that the card actually, forewarned you about. I'm sorry, I'm coughing. I've been talking too long. I'm sorry. So go about your day and look for, anticipate the energy of this card and look for it. This will help you really internalize the card. It'll help you remember the card. At the end of the day, document what situations arose during the day that made you think of the card. Take notes. Take notes about your day. The more you do this, you'll eventually get through. And I mean, if you do a card a day, a couple months, you'll have it done. The more you practice with them, the more comfortable you'll get. When you're starting out, stick to the meanings themselves of the cards. And then once you've defined what each card means, then step back and recap what you just summarized. You might pull 3 cards, define them, and then step back and say, how do these cards work together? How are these cards, related? And if you go in on some of those reads that I did on the readings that I did on that other post, you'll see where, I go through and I explain, each card, this card means this card means this card means this. Overall, this is what your cards mean together. And so, not only does that give you an understanding of how each card has significance in and of itself, it also gives you an opportunity to see how the cards work together as a group, as a team. So that's just a suggestion I have, is to sort of do that journal entry, card a day exercise. It'll really help you. It'll really help the cards come to life for you. And the more you do readings, the more you'll see cards pop up. You might, have a card pop up 2 or 3 times, and you might have to go look up their meaning 2 or 3 times. But eventually, you'll start to have an understanding of the cards, and you'll start to see them, and you might end up with a few favorites, like me and my 5 of Cups. The ones I used years ago, Jennifer. The ones I used years ago was a beginner's set. I told I was right on with it. This is definitely something I want to do. My sister used to do readings, but she's busy with 2 babies right now. Yeah, I know. I have 3 kids. I have 3 kids under the age of 10, and school's starting. And then I have a small business, and then I do this, and then I have a full-time job. So the struggle is real with the babies. But it's something I enjoy. And some people exercise, some people travel. I don't know. I enjoy doing this stuff. I enjoy helping people. This is a way that I can help people by giving them guidance and stuff. So, all right, guys, I've been on here long enough. I'm going to go home. Speaking of babies, I'm going to go home to my kids. So let me know if you have any questions. You can post in the group. You can comment on this video. I will try to get back to everybody's questions as they come in. So, all right, guys. Hey, have a great evening and enjoy your families. Good night.